Okay, here we are with the second part of our presentations on William Shakespeare. Here, in this one, we will talk about Hamlet, Julius Caesar, and Macbeth. I will just give you some small hints, some small summaries of what we said in class, because obviously this presentation would be way too long if I spent my time telling you once again everything. So let's start with Hamlet. So Hamlet, it is, as I've told you, Shakespeare's most famous tragedy. It's been quoted, enacted, shot as a film, shot as a theater broadcast all over the world for many times. And it is Shakespeare's most famous tragedy because it is probably one of the deepest. It deals with many themes. These are just some of them. So the power of man against history, as we see in the story, for example, of Ophelia. Betrayal, obviously, love, madness, family relationships. There have been many psychoanalytical studies on Hamlet and his relationships with his father and his mother, for example. But, as I've told you in class, it is first of all a revenge story. It is a story of revenge and of how a son can make right to his father. The problem is that Hamlet is a very complex character. He is very modern because he does not act. He represents Shakespeare, the man in the time of in Shakespeare's time. He is modern, and he can be seen as a contemporary character as well. The fact that he embodies new views on the figure of the hero is very important because, as we have said, he's very different from the classic hero like Beowulf, for example. If this was a medieval play, it would probably last 20 minutes, not 4 hours, because once the Hamlet's father's ghost appears and tells his son, "Avenge me because I was killed," he would probably just draw his sword, go to the throne room, kill the king, and die in the act, probably. While Hamlet uses his intellect because he wants to be sure that the ghost is really his father's, and he is not resolute. We will see in the monologue that he is weighing his options between living and carrying on his revenge and killing himself because he is not strong enough. And by doing so, Hamlet represents all men in a period when major changes happen in the world. We sum them up because we had geographical discoveries, for example, that made the world larger. Europeans met other very different, very strange people who worship different and strange gods from their point of view. For example, it was a period when the Pope progressively lost his authority, in which religion was not just one religion for everyone, but we started to have many different denominations, and they all felt they had the same dignity, just like the Catholic one. It is a period when science starts to become modern, and we see that man discovers that Earth is not at the center of the universe, and probably man is not at the center of the Earth, is not the most important creature on Earth. So it is a period of doubt. And so, in these 34 lines that represents the Hamlet's monologue in Act 3, we see how the most important part is probably the second half of the first line. And by the way, you know that this first line is probably the most quoted line in the whole world. To be or not to be, that is the question. And the important part is that is the question. That is the important element here is that Hamlet is not doing something, but he is asking a question. He is asking himself, and since he represents every man in his period and probably today as well, the point here is that questions are very important. The real end, the real purpose of man is asking questions. In this case, he's asking himself whether it is better to live and complete his revenge or to kill himself and find some peace. In the end, we know that he will fulfill his revenge and he will die doing that. Okay? So let's move on to the next one. Let's move on to Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar is quite different from Hamlet, even though it deals with some of the same themes. First of all, it is a historical play. It deals with real events in history. It deals with Julius Caesar's murder by Brutus Cassius and all the other conspirators, and it deals with the civil war that followed Caesar's death. The extract below, the extract that we talked in class and that you have in its complete form on Google Classroom, I will not show you the whole extract here because it is too long and it would mess the next slide, because it would be too small in character size. Shows one important element, shows how politicians use their ability to speak, their rhetorical skill to influence the crowd. And we will see how easily the crowd is swayed, how easily the crowd is convinced by a politician. And in this case, as I've told you in class, Mark Antony, who's the character who speaks in the extract, uses irony. And remember, irony is not something that makes you laugh, or not necessarily something that makes you laugh, but it's just a figure of speech in which the speaker says something while meaning its opposite. So let's have a look at Antony's irony. This is just part of the extract. It is the first part of Antony's speech, and it is the reaction of the citizens, of the four citizens that we have on the scene, on the stage, which represent the crowd which attends Caesar's funeral. The idea that I've mentioned to you in class is that Antony, in the first line, which is just like Hamlet's, one of the most quoted in English literature, is that by speaking to each side of the stage, which, as you remember, is not was in the middle of the audience, Antony, by saying friends, Romans, countrymen, speaks to the whole audience in the theater and try to have them become the audience of Caesar's funeral. So he does that in order to have the audience involved in his speech, and the four actors playing the citizens become somehow just the spokespersons for the whole audience. So I will point out now all the elements, all the irony that Antony uses. And all four instances here, Antony uses the same idea. He says that Brutus and all the other conspirators are honorable men. But when he says that, he obviously means the opposite, because he says that Brutus told you that Caesar was ambitious and he wanted to become king, but the crown was offered to Caesar 3 times during a ceremony and Caesar 3 times refused that crown. So how can he be ambitious if he didn't want to become king? But using his irony, says Brutus is an honorable man. Brutus is telling you the truth. So what he's implying is that Brutus is not telling the truth. Caesar was not ambitious, and Brutus, he's just a murderer who killed Caesar for his own advantage and to gain power in Rome. And you can see how in the right column the citizens' reaction is basically the one that Antony wants. They say that Antony is right, Caesar was killed wrongly, unjustly, and they say that they were villains. The conspirators were villains. So they want Antony to read Caesar's will, which was Antony's purpose all along, because he wanted to incite the crowd to against Brutus and the other conspirators. Okay, so now let's move to Macbeth. What we have here is a tragedy that deals with hubris and ambition. Macbeth basically becomes too ambitious and decides he wants to be king. In order to do so, he kills Scotland's king in his house, breaking the vows of hospitality. And then, in the end, he is killed alongside his wife and everyone else, and he pays the price for his ambition. The real interesting part in this tragedy, the real interesting element, is that both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are very human characters, because they are ambitious, but they have doubts, and they have them at different times. Macbeth is doubtful in the beginning, and we will see that in the extract. While Lady Macbeth, in the end, goes crazy because she cannot stand the weight of their sin, because killing a king was the ultimate sin somehow. It was like killing God. Remember that kings at that time were kings for divine right. And why? But why does Shakespeare write this kind of tragedy? Well, probably part of its inspiration was related to the gunpowder plot. As you remember, in 1605, Guy Fawkes and other Catholic extremists tried to blow up the parliament with the king inside it. They were caught before they could do any damage, and they were all tried and killed and executed in a very gruesome way. But in order to celebrate the fact that monarchy remained steady in its position, Shakespeare wrote Macbeth, in which the main characters try to kill the king, try to become king themselves, but in the end pay the ultimate price for their ambition. And here, in this extract, we can see how Macbeth is doubtful, is feeling, this is just after Macbeth kills the king, and we see how he is feeling doubts, and he's feeling some kind of guilt in relation to what he just did. And here we see that Lady Macbeth tells him that he was right in doing that, and he did that in order to become king. So if he wanted to be king, he had to kill the king, okay, the ruling king. That's the whole point of this scene, and we see, and also remember that in the video that I posted on Classroom, Ben Crystal discusses these lines, talking about rhythm and the meters that Shakespeare uses here, okay? So this concludes this short presentation. So thank you for now, and I'll see you next time.